Today, with the federal election approaching, I'd like to offer some advice for progressives wrestling with the thorny issue of strategic voting. Specifically, I have 4 tips to share for anxious progressive voters about how to cast your ballot strategically, but to do so wisely and attuned to your local situation. First, a little context. Like many of you, I'm sure, I strongly dislike our current first past the post electoral system. It upsets me that people feel compelled to vote strategically, mainly to prevent the outcome they most oppose, rather than voting for the person or party they most support. I dearly wish we had a form of proportional representation that would liberate people to vote their values and to produce a parliament that best captures the preferences of Canadians. But until that happens, this is the system we have, and we are forced to make the best of it. The priority for most rightly remains how to prevent a conservative win, which, to be clear, is still a real possibility. The Conservatives may be polling in second place, but not by much, and their base remains highly activated and motivated. Most of us understand that a Pierre Poilievre-led government would be disastrous across many domains. Climate progress, the survival of vital public institutions like the CBC, immigration, foreign policy, foreign aid, Indigenous and trans rights. The list is long. Poilievre's politics and agenda disturbingly mirrors that of Trump. But it's also the case that if the Carney-led Liberals secure a sweeping majority, which according to the latest polls is not only a distinct possibility, but likely, many progressives are going to wake up on April 29th feeling deep regret, a lament that will likely only grow over the ensuing months as it becomes clear that on numerous policy fronts, although not all, Carney is to the right of Trudeau. And yet, too often the call for strategic voting is code for vote Liberal. Historically, as many progressives understand, it is under minority governments that we have landed our biggest and most enduring policy wins. Minority governments are forced to be more accountable. And for social movements, minority governments provide us with the most leverage to successfully campaign for progressive policy wins. So, how then can we best produce an electoral outcome that speaks to all these moving pieces? So here are 4 tips for the perplexed progressive voter. Tip number 1, do not base your decision on national polls. See, we don't directly elect the government or the prime minister. Rather, in our parliamentary system, we are in fact engaged in 343 local elections, each of which will select their member of parliament. And often national polls don't reflect the reality in your local riding, where party preferences might be different, a local incumbent may be particularly popular, or an inspiring new candidate may be galvanizing excitement. That last point merits special attention. An inspiring candidate, existing or new, can attract hundreds of volunteers, and the resulting ground game can result in a local story that defies the national narrative. I've been a volunteer on enough local campaigns that I've seen this firsthand. Bold and exciting candidates can increase riding level support for their party, even as support for that same party may be declining overall. Trying to map national or provincial polling onto local ridings can produce terrible predictions. Take the recent Ontario provincial election, for example, where the pollsters predicted the collapse of the Ontario NDP and that the Ontario Liberals would supplant them as the official opposition. That didn't happen. Instead, while the province-wide polling wasn't wrong, the Ontario NDP ended up with almost twice as many seats as the Liberals. As longtime pollster Alan Gregg wrote in a Toronto Star postmortem, the common wisdom that candidates matter far less than parties seems to be less true today. We, he was referring to pollsters and pundits, completely missed something that was happening on the ground. Which brings me to point number 2. Be guided by your local context. Far too often, progressive-leaning voters that I'm hearing are saying, usually I vote NDP or Green, but in this election, I'm too worried about a Poilievre win, and so I'm voting Liberal. Now, that might make good sense in some ridings, but not all. In some ridings, that have an NDP or Green incumbent or an inspiring new NDP or Green candidate, especially if combined with a less than inspiring Liberal candidate, voting Liberal could merely further split the progressive vote, allowing the Conservative candidate to come up the middle. There are a number of Vancouver Island ridings where this exact scenario is at risk of playing out. Moreover, despite the Conservatives retaining strong national support, many people live in ridings where the Conservatives have zero chance of winning and often run third. That's the case in my own riding in East Vancouver. In those ridings, people should feel free to vote their values, to vote their conscience without fear of helping to produce a Conservative win. And indeed, by not voting Liberal, you may be helping to produce a more progressive minority Parliament outcome. Now, figuring this all out isn't easy. But again, note my previous point number one, don't be guided by the national polls. My third bit of advice. In seeking to determine the local context, do not rely on riding level data from 338canada.com. Look, I get it. We are all desperate for riding level polling to help inform our strategic voting decisions. Consequently, many turn to 338canada.com or smartvoting.ca for local guidance because both publish riding level data that claims to show that the party's relative standing. The problem, however, is that these entities are not actually doing local polling. Rather, both are engaged in a modeling exercise. As 338 Canada explains on their website, it is engaged in, quote, a statistical model of electoral projections based on opinion polls, electoral history, and demographic data. Take these claims with a hunk of salt. Effectively, what both of these sites are doing is taking the results of the last election in each riding and then mapping the latest aggregated, mostly national polling data onto those results. But this methodology fails to capture the popularity of local candidates, incumbent or new, or the potential strength of an inspiring local campaign. As a result, their riding level predictions can prove disastrously wrong. And my fourth point of advice, and it's a super important one, the next parliament will need progressive champions. To be clear, at this stage in the game, we're either going to have a Liberal or Conservative government. And given that choice, I hope the Liberals win. But I also want that government to have its feet held to the fire. And we should all want to see a strong contingent of climate and social justice champions elected who will do just that. If you are lucky enough to live in or near a riding where such a champion has a chance of winning, then please do everything that you can to help get them over the line. Lead Now recently published a list of candidates they consider raise the bar champions. They call them worthy of support. But there are others beyond that list. We desperately need to elect people who genuinely understand the intersecting crises we confront and who will insist on bold action. With the country on fire, my friends, we need to elect political firefighters. The takeaway from all of this, by all means, vote strategically. This election is too important to do anything else, but do so wisely. A strategic vote looks different in each of our 343 ridings. And the day after the election, we all need to get right back to work, ensuring the next government is ready to tackle the crises that we face at scale.